Hi, I'm Jim, and in this video I'm going to discuss ISO. ISO is a strange acronym that stands for International Standards Organization. ISO is a measure of the sensitivity of our electronic sensors, and it's equivalent to the old ASA or American Standards Association back in the days of film. Hey, remember film? Setting ISO is really simple. You want to keep it at the lowest setting you can to properly expose your image. Every sensor has a base ISO setting that produces the cleanest images. By raising the ISO, we're essentially amplifying the electric signal that's produced by the sensor when light strikes it. However, all electronic devices have stray electronic signals known as noise. When we raise the ISO, our good signal, the electronic pulses created by light striking the sensor are increased along with the stray pulse or noise. But the higher it's raised, the difference between the noise and our good signal becomes narrower. The noise shows up in our image as random patterns of luminance and color values. Here's an example of an image photographed with a high ISO value in low light, and as you can see how it's affected the quality of the image. Take a look at these two images. One photographed at ISO 100 and the other one at the maximum ISO. Notice the noise and lower dynamic range of the high ISO setting. This is an extreme example, but it illustrates what happens when you raise the ISO. Essentially, you want to keep the ISO to the lowest value that's practical for the image that you're capturing. On a bright sunny day, keep it down to the lowest setting, likely 100 or 160. In scenes with lower light, you'll likely have to raise the ISO, but only raise it as much as necessary. There's also a mathematical relationship among ISO values. ISO 200 is twice as sensitive as ISO 100. ISO 400 doubles the sensitivity of ISO 200, and so on. By the same logic, ISO 100 is half as sensitive as ISO 200. Keep this in mind, as it is going to be important later when you're working out your exposure settings. Under both semi-automatic priority modes, that's aperture priority and shutter priority, the photographer must select the ISO setting. However, some cameras have an automatic ISO setting which allows the camera to determine the ISO to use. I personally don't use that myself, but if you do, I recommend, if possible, set the maximum ISO that the camera can use. I would limit it to perhaps a maximum of 800 or maybe 1600 depending on your camera. Sensors in our cameras are getting better and better at recording clean images in low light with higher ISO settings. There are also numerous plugins for our computer processing programs that can help reduce the noise in our images, but usually at the expense of making softer looking images. However, it's better to have some noise in our images, which can be reduced somewhat, than motion blur from using a shutter speed that's too slow. We'll be getting into more on shutter speeds in another video. Finally, I want to mention a discussion that has been featured on some blogs and social media about ISO. This discussion centers around the base or native ISO of camera sensors. A base or native ISO is usually the lowest ISO for any particular sensor that requires no amplification. Some indicate that the best results are achieved when the camera is set at the base ISO or multiples of the base ISO. So if the base ISO is ISO 100, the best results are by using 200 or 400, 800, etc. If the base ISO is 160, then the best results are achieved by setting the ISO to 160, 320, 640, and so on. By best results, they're referring to better dynamic range and lower noise levels. Now, I can't confirm or refute this, but do your own tests, and just keep in mind, just always use the lowest ISO that you practically can. Okay, let's summarize. ISO is a sensitivity measurement of our camera sensors, and it stands for International Standards Organization. Always use the lowest practical ISO value that you can. If you double your ISO value from the previous value, it becomes twice as sensitive, And likewise, if you have that value, it's half as sensitive. Higher ISO values increase sensor noise in the final image. If you don't understand any of these summary points, please go back and review the video until you do understand them. Thank you for watching. If you have comments or questions, be sure to leave them below this video, and please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss future videos.